the way that it drives, if I'm just driving by myself, which I find myself doing more and more and more in iRacing, it's just, look at that! Look at that! It's just, that's what you do in real life. Hey there, long time no see. I'm Ermin, and this is iRacing. Yes, you heard right. This video is actually going to involve me driving in iRacing while talking about the experience. Now, before the inevitable torrents of hate comes flying in, I'll explain why this is happening. A few weeks ago, I got kindly invited into a somewhat prestigious upcoming event. The catch is that said event takes place in iRacing. As some of my favourite sim racers and personalities take part in this series, I just couldn't say no. However, one of my driving principles has always been to not let a good opportunity go. So I thought, while I fumble my way around in the Porsche Cup car, why don't I take a moment to divorce my opinion about iRacing's monetization from the game itself, and genuinely just review it from a pure driving, physics-based perspective, as we have done to just about every other major sim on this channel. Don't fret, I still feel exactly the same way about the packaging and monetization of iRacing as I always have, but this is a genuinely good opportunity for me to put it up alongside all the other major sims out there and have a chat about how it slots in among them. Well, believe it or not, we're actually here in iRacing. Road Atlanta as we have it. I was kind of excited about this because iRacing is one of the few sims that actually has a properly laser scanned version of this track. And it's one of my favorites in the world, and I'd never actually driven an, accurate rendering of it. Just that, what was it, that R Factor one that was kind of there, but kind of not. Now, everything has been pre-tuned. I've kind of warmed up a little bit on the circuit. Let's talk about it from here as we leave the pits. So, iRacing, less yellow than the last time I drove it. Very cool, very welcome, good job. Leaving the pits, slowly. We can talk about one very pertinent thing as I drive very slowly to warm up the tires. The tires themselves. They have two states insofar as I can see. In the window and out of the window. If they're out of the window, such as right now, the moment you take them to the edge, you are just gonna spin. You are just gonna spin uncontrollably and the car is gonna give out and do all kinds of weird things. The moment they're properly in the window after about 2 laps of the circuit, it becomes a completely different story. Driving the car starts to feel a bit like a combination of AMS2 and R Factor 2. I still stick by that from my original review from months ago. It feels very much like driving on a physical tire model. It feels like you're driving on rubber rather than driving on calculations like ACC. When you lose grip and you break out, it doesn't feel like it's some nebulous slide code and you're just like, just like wildly trying to seesaw the car back and hoping that the grip code re-engages. It's a lot more nuanced and subtle than that. So the tire model seems a fair mite ahead of ACC, in my subjective opinion anyway. Certainly the car feels more like driving an actual automobile, but certain things are not quite as developed. Certain things, I feel like the aero model is a little bit more locked in ACC. Certainly the very clear-cut elements such as the graphics, the sounds are a world ahead in ACC, and of course the force feedback, which is funny because the force feedback in ACC was kind of renowned as one of its weak points, is like a universe ahead of iRacing. iRacing, of course, very well-renowned weak point with its force feedback, running on that 60 Hz engine. So you've got to run your filtering quite high, which instills quite a bit of delay. But you've got to run it, you've got to get that stuff smoothed out, otherwise it feels absolutely terrible to race because it's so grainy, there's so much noise in there. But once you get past it, once you spend some time dialing it in like I did here, it becomes perfectly serviceable. It's certainly not impossible to drive with. And I know you guys will say IRFFB, I know. Will is the big iRacing guy that I know, Boosted Media Will. He loves this title. He doesn't run IRFFB, he says that it causes lag, too much delay for him. I'm not a fan of delay. I'll deal with the onboard force feedback rather than messing with that stuff. Anyway, we're warmed up now. I'll see if I can show you, the car a little bit closer to the edge, or at least insofar as I can drive it. So I spoke to Tortellini about iRacing a bit, and he told me about how it differs from ACC in that you can really trail brake the cars right into the corners. He was telling me about how you can really aggressively trail brake in iRacing, and I'm having to refactor the way that I think about driving GT3s in this, because it's not quite as broken as ACC. You don't have to line up a perfect thing And the moment you deviate from that perfect thing, you know the delta is going to go into the negatives. You actually have room in iRacing to adjust as a driver might in real life. You might overcook the entry, and you might have to rotate the rear end on the throttle. And that doesn't necessarily always, you know, suck away lap time, or at least as much lap time as you would expect from something like ACC. All right, take two. I'm not doing so good here. I'm not even in the 119s. All right, here we go. Come on. All right, there we go. So that feels very much like R Factor 2 to me, driving the 488 in R Factor. I'm kind of what I call surfing the car, right? You trail brake it into the apex, rotate the rear end, and then take over with the throttle. Continue rotating the rear end with the throttle. And this, of course, very exciting. What's going on? Oh my god, no, I went understeered out. There's a lot going on down there, especially on that corner. There's so much happening when the car's under load, and you jump on a little lip like that. I'm certainly slowing down a bit as I talk, but that's fine. See, that kind of thing, very interesting. If I did that kind of a move in ACC, you would see the delta getting more and more negative. It'd be like plus 27, plus 28, etc., etc. Whereas in iRacing, sometimes you can overcook it a bit, and it's not as punishing. And that kind of, in some strange way, makes it more fun to drive. This feels like a strange fusion to me of R Factor 2 and AMS 2. I don't know if it's the physical tires or what, but the driving principles feel the most similar to me out of those two titles. You can really get on the curbs, see? That's the R Factor effect, that's the AMS effect. You can really eat the curbs, much as a driver would in real life. I mean, they're not that afraid of the curbs. Maybe a little bit more in Road Atlanta because it's insane, but you know what I mean. It's not like that sausage phobia that you have in like a McLaren in ACC, where the moment you bottom out, the car just does this cut, fly, bounce, like divide by zero error. So there's definitely something to it I do prefer. Obviously the graphics, obviously the sounds are not even near the same league. When it comes to presentability, iRacing is not as nice to look at. However, one thing that is nicer to look at, and I might load this up for you guys in a sec now that I'm finishing a lap, but what I'm going to do is go back to the pits quickly. Right, so we're looking from the interior here, replay through some of those laps. One of the things I really enjoy about iRacing from the exterior, and this is like the torch that it's taken over from R Factor again and AMS, the way the cars move from the outside. Obviously in the GT3's case, you know, they don't move very much in real life, so you're not going to see a lot of what I'm talking about. It's probably better to illustrate in the Cup car after this, but the way the car moves from the exterior view, the vehicle dynamics, it looks like one of the most lifelike to me. And that makes sense. I mean, iRacing is for broadcast purposes, it's for massively online stuff, so of course they want to make it look the part. Whereas, let's say ACC, it doesn't seem like all the physics calculations are perfectly visible from the exterior, so the cars feel very zombie-like and kind of broken in their movement, like they're just very kind of robotic. Whereas iRacing has that flow that you would expect from the dynamic tire model games. You can't see the tire deforming, but you can see the car acting as if the tire were deforming. So, a lot of strange things there in iRacing, but you know what? At the end of the day, the physics experience matters more to me personally than anything else. So, in that sense, iRacing has been a bit of a strange one. It's been a bit of a strange revelation. Obviously, I was expecting, based on what everybody was telling me, that it would be far worse. But I have to call it as I see it. I have to call it as it is. I'm in no particular desire to go all tribal on this and be like, iRacing bad, no matter what. You know, the driving experience around Road Atlanta, very fun, very engaging, even in the car classes, you know, plebeian as a GT3. So let's jump to another track and car combination, one that's going to elicit a lot more motion from the car, a lot more movement from me. It's going to be a lot harder to actually drive, believe it or not. Part 2, we're here at the Nurburgring, my spiritual home. Of course, the 24-hour layout, because let's get honest, that's the only layout that truly matters. We're here in the venerable Porsche Cup car for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that it's one of the newest, if not the newest car to iRacing, insofar as I'm aware. I saw it being raced on the Porsche All-Stars races online, which I was a little bit upset not to be a part of, I have to admit, but hopefully to be rectified next year. One of the reasons I'm actually driving this thing, trying to learn its very unique handling dynamics, just so I make sure I don't take out anyone important when it comes down to it. And, you know, like we say, never let a good opportunity go to waste, which is partly why I took the opportunity to kind of learn about iRacing while, you know, picking up this car on the tracks that we're going to be racing. You really have to feel the weight transfer. You really have to feel what the car is doing to you, because it's going to understeer like crazy until the tires warm up. So very much still the case like the GT3. I'm going to have to combine our, you know, our pace lap as well as our warm-up lap all in the one, because we don't have infinite time. Otherwise I'll be here for hours upon hours upon hours. You can see the car is so understeery there, but there's so much going on with the model, and that's one thing that surprises me. As kind of hunkering and slow as this thing is, it has this stuff happening. It's like over and understeer. I'm feeling the tires chirp underneath me, you know? You see? It's just like, it's yanking me around. It's doing all kinds of stuff going on at Heusinkveld here. Look at that. Just like, you get on there, the tires pudge on that curb, you feel like you're on rubber, you don't feel like you're on equations, you know? That's the important thing for me. I want to feel like I can do the things that I can do in real life, and that my training in the sim matters, that it carries over. That's the most important thing. And the craziest thing about iRacing at this point in time, if we divorce the idea of the marketing and the pricing model and all of that fun stuff that I've explored ad nauseum for the last 2 years, the fundamental driving experience of some cars on some tracks is very, very nice. And that's a strange admission for me to make, but again, in the spirit of being honest, in the spirit of being upfront, it is what it is. It's not something I expected to find, certainly. Oh man, I felt the car absorb that bump. I felt it flex into that compression there at Schwedenkreuz. There's just those little things that I loved about R Factor 2 are there. Perhaps because of the physical time model, I don't know. Maybe it's a similar principle, maybe it's a similar founding mathematical principle they're using, but you know, it seems to have less of the strange knock-on effects that they haven't managed to get out of R Factor 2 yet, which they appear to have abandoned their search for insofar as I can see. So it's kind of got all the goodness with less of the negatives, but with the caveat of not really presenting that to you in the most flattering way, because again, this force feedback engine, 60 hertz, you know? You're not really feeling it. You're not feeling that much. I mean, you're feeling a lot of grain and it's a bit strange, but you feel like if the game were able to give you those forces with finer detail, you would appreciate what's happening so much more, because just the amount of flopping and swaying and bouncing and all kinds of stuff that's happening on this car right now is just, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, you know? And it's hard to drive. Oh god, really hard to drive. There's no ABS. Don't lock. It feels less like something digitized and feels a bit more like something real. Until it doesn't. Until you feel the force feedback and you can feel the low cycles. Oh no! Whoa. And look at that. That was because I had the rear end loaded, right? So the left tires were loaded. I was turning, or very loaded, and then I was accelerating, and then one of my tires got on the curb. And the game was like, hey, that curb is slippery, here's what happens. And that is exactly what I would expect to happen in that circumstance. And they're the things that I love. Like when I get punished in realistic ways, I need to know this in case I end up there to avoid making that mistake. And that's why we have sims. That's why they exist. Now entering my favorite part of, any track in the world. Sector 3 of the Nordschleife. Going uphill, then going back downhill. It's basically like a carnival ride, really. Oh, look at that. And there's just, I'm doing so much. Like, look at the amount that I'm doing. Look at what I have to do to keep the car on the road. And that's what you do in real life. It's like, of all games, of all sims, the one that is explaining finally why I love physical time models is iRacing of all sims. Like, what kind of cosmic joke is that, you know? But still, like, I can't lie. I can't go here and say, play some kind of partisan games where I'm like, no, iRacing always bad. You gotta call it as it is. At the end of the day, as much as I have a huge difference with, the way that they present and sell this to people, again, I'm not gonna get into the details of that here, but the way that it drives, if I'm just driving by myself, which I find myself doing more and more and more in iRacing, it's just, look at that! It's just, that's what you do in real life. I mean, that's kind of how cars are balanced now, you know? Like, it's intuitive. You got to get in there and, like, act in concert with it, but it's not like the car wants to punish you. It's like there's a window, right? And you can work with that window. iRacing, look at that! iRacing now gives you that window. Just take it to the edge. Use the curb. Use the curb advantageously or badly, like there. Use it in whatever way you want. You now can. If I had to break it down and talk about which sim I would like to practice the Nordschleife on for like actual real-life driving more than any other sim, it's probably iRacing right now. And I almost can't believe I said that. Oh, that feels weird. There is a lap of the 24-hour Nurburgring layout in a Porsche Cup car. So let's take a look at it from the outside and talk about the external vehicle dynamics. Right, so there she is. Take a look and marvel, and this marked the turnaround point for me when I saw the 911 GT3 doing this stuff. Look at the weight transfer, look at the way that the car, look at that. It gets those little fine details, look at this. Look at that. It's just, the way that it nestles the tires in between the road and the curb, you actually get the sensation that it's like the tire is a three-dimensional object that's interacting with the entire space around it. It isn't just like arbitrary points designated underneath the tire. You get the feeling that the connection to the road is real in a sense, and probably the most elegant way that I put it was it feels like you're driving on rubber rather than equations. It's surreal because I was just playing an old Sega Genesis F1 game I used to play back in the mid-90s, and to just even imagine how far games have gotten in the last quarter century is mind-boggling. The fact that we can even get this close to the way a Porsche Cup car would actually drive on the Nürburgring is mind-boggling to me. This is physics talk, you know me, I could go on forever and ever and ever, and especially now that we're getting into Sector 3, this is very dangerous. I feel like I need to wrap this video up before we get to the end of the track, but oh, I love this track. So we're getting up to Whipperman, alright, we'll watch through the Whipperman, and then we're good. Grab the curb on the inside. Yes. Yeah, you can kind of see it chirping, and the tires are like losing grip and then gaining grip and then losing grip and then gaining grip. And you can see there that it gets light over the hill. You kind of have to adjust the way the car drives because it kind of understeers out. I don't know, there's something to this. There's something to this. If we divorce iRacing from the way it's monetized and review purely the gameplay itself, what we have with some of the modern content is probably one of the better driving sims on the market. Force feedback, graphics, and sounds aside, the core driving experience in iRacing is legitimately quite engaging, as they seem to have taken on board much of the criticism from yesteryear to overcome the characteristics which landed it with the moniker Ice Racing. It's far from a perfect sim, being based on a very old engine, having a menu that wouldn't look out of place in 1998, and possibly the worst force feedback in the entire industry. That aside, many of you love the online ecosystem, and from what I can say of my solo dalliances so far, I certainly do enjoy the core driving experience, at least among the limited cars and tracks that I've tried. I know that the inevitable criticism will come up of me not doing it justice by racing online, so what I'll ask here is that something you actually want to see? If so, let me know in the comments. Many of my creative friends run regular races. In the meantime, hit that sub because we're back to stay, and there's a ton more sim racing videos coming, so until that next one, I'll see you all later.